Because you mentioned being able to separate yourself from work enough to sort of stay sane and not get overwhelmed, and in order to not make work your entire life. How would you, if you were talking to a truck driver who's out on the road for 3 weeks or 4 weeks at a time, and they a lot of the time have a family at home, they have a wife and kids, for example, how do you go about separating from your job if your office is coming with you everywhere you go, pretty much for for an entire month at a time?
I think the truth is it's complicated. And I think like most things in life, there are no simple answers. Often when I go into an organization, one of the questions that people ask me is, what do I need to do to be happier? And that's a great question, right? We all want to be happy, but there's no secret, right? There's no magic thing that I can just say, oh, if you do this, you will be happy. It varies, right? Human beings are very complex. We're all different. What's going to work for some people is not going to work for other people. And so what I can talk about are some general trends, some things to think about. But each individual will have to structure that in a way that's meaningful and works for them. One of the things that I do is I actually consult with individuals who, in some ways on the outside, appear to be very successful. They have, maybe good jobs. They're doing well, let's say on paper. And they come into me and they say, you know what, I don't know what the problem is. I'm just not happy. I mean, they're not suffering any specific pathologies. They're not, depressed or clinically. They're not, again, high anxiety, but they just don't feel like something's right. And so one of the things that we do is we talk about how they are structuring and managing their time. The model that I find most useful was actually developed in part by a researcher by the name of Alfred Adler. And Adler said that in order to be psychologically well, right, in order to be healthy, there are three main areas in your life that you have to pay attention to. What we're doing with my research team is we're actually adding a fourth dimension, so I will include that in our conversation here. And as we talk about these areas, each area is going to require an allocation of time that you need to say, here's an amount of time I'm going to put into this, but it's also going to require you to set specific goals and objectives for yourself in that area. And the first area, not surprisingly, is work, right? And that probably occupies a great deal of our time right now. And so in order to make this a healthy environment, right, one of the things that you need to do is you need to be able to set goals in your job to see that you're making progress and growing and developing. Again, I'm not an expert in trucking right now, but in almost every job that I work with, there are places where you can learn new things, there are new skills, there are new objectives that you can set for yourself. And so within this area, we need to be setting goals, we need to be allocating time. And when we're using that time, most of that time needs to be focused on the work. Okay, so that's our first main area. The second main area is what Adler called family or love, right? And so, and again, this varies for different people. And so this could be your family. When he talks about loving relationships, he talks about people who you are very close to, that you have a deep friendship with. But in order to be healthy, we have to allocate time where we're spending that time with those individuals. And it's not just spending time, it's setting goals within that time of things that you're trying to accomplish and do. So, I mean, we have our work goals, we're allocating time to that. But when we spend time with our family, it's a good idea to have things that we're trying to do. What are our goals for our interaction? I think one of the important things here is we are not just investing time, but we need to have shared experiences. And so when we are with our family, when we are with the people that we care about, part of it is being around them, but part of them is actually being there with them.
Can you tell what is the difference between those? Can you give a little bit more?
Yes. So my son's a little bit older now. So he's 26, but I remember when he was in high school, when we would have dinners together, we were together, and this was a family rule that we had. We always had dinners together. But there were no cell phones. There was no TV. There were no distractions. And so we could be together, but if he's on his cell phone and connecting with other people or checking Facebook, we're not really with each other. And so in order to really be together, you have to put away all that social media. He was kind of used to it because it's how he grew up. But sometimes his friends would come over and we would ask them to turn their cell phones off during dinner. And they're like, well, I don't know if I can do that. It's like, yeah, but we have to be really with each other, right? And that's where conversations, that's where the important interactions take place. And it's hard, right? Because those things dominate a lot of our lives right now. And so, but to do that, right, we have to be together. The third area for Adler was community. Community are social engagements that we have with friends, with other people, but it's usually something that we do to achieve a greater good. For example, for some people, it's faith-based communities, right? And so investing time in, going to your church, working with your faith, doing things like that, that's important. For other people, it could be volunteering, right? And so maybe there's a cause or something that you want to volunteer for, to contribute to. Again, for some people, it might be an activity, a bowling team, right? And so, but it's something that you cannot do on your own. And the big difference between work and community activities, work, you invest time and you get something direct from that time. So you spend time at work, you get a paycheck. For my students at college is their work. They invest in their studies, they get a grade. And so it's something tangible that rewards them. Community is where you're putting in time that has a cost for you. So again, you get stuff out of community, right? Hopefully you get a good feeling, you feel like you're having fun or doing something important. But usually community activities will cost you something, right? You pay to be on that team. You use that time to serve that volunteer organization. But what you get out of that is a sense of meaning and purpose in your life, that you're doing something that has a greater good to it. And the final area, and the one that my team and I are trying to incorporate, is a time just for self. And it's setting aside time and setting goals that, and selfish isn't the exact right word, but they really are focused on the things that fill you up, on the things that give you meaning. In order, right, in using this model, in order to be healthy, what you need over a period of time is to invest time and to set goals in each of these areas. How you do that is up to you, right? And so again, and it's going to be different for everyone. For example, in my life, right, I have work goals. I have, objectives that I'm trying to accomplish. Here's something new I'm learning. Here's a new class I'm going to be teaching, a new research project that I'm working on. And I have goals that I'm trying to achieve there that are important to me. I have family goals. My wife and I like to travel. We like to eat. And so when we're with each other, we say our goals are to try at least one new restaurant every month. right? And so that's a goal that we have. It kind of brings us together. It's kind of fun. I have community goals. Again, I work with a couple of volunteer agencies. I work with a rescue dog service. And so my goal is to put in a certain amount of hours every month, working, helping out the rescue dog service. Again, and so those are the kind of things that I like to do there. And my self time, I try to set aside time every day. For me, it's to exercise primarily with bike riding when the weather is nice. And if the weather's not nice, I'm training indoors for when the weather does get nice so I can go out on my bike rides. But this is a time where I'm alone, I'm out on a ride, and it gives me time to think and reflect and kind of remove myself from the hubbub of the general day to make sure that I'm doing the right things for myself.
I'm thinking about the first point that you made, though, or the first out of those four, regarding, I'm not sure how did you phrase it, not perfecting work, but increasing efficiency, getting better at different things at work and so on. If I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, you used to work at a tobacco factory, right?
I
Yes,
did.
you did, right?
I did.
I remember you saying that, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, something about moving maybe in college, a box of tobacco from one side to another, something like that. And you said that tobacco that would fall onto the ground, they would take and make merits out of it. Is that right? Am I exactly right? Because I remember this.
You are spot on. Oh my God. No, that.
Philip Morris.
I would go into work and I would stand in my spot, and there were two machines. One would put the tobacco in one case, and I would move it over to another machine that would put it and roll it in the cigarettes, and then 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And
Now, the reason I'm not just bringing it up for fun, I'm thinking about it in terms of that sounds a bit less involved than being a professional truck driver. But just like with truck drive, like there's a finite number of things you can do in that position. With truck driving, it's not the most creative type of thing. There's only a set amount of things you're going to do. There's a ceiling that's not always doesn't take very long to hit with a lot of these different tasks. So if you're a pretty clever guy and you're pretty driven and you're physically capable, you're likely to hit that, some of those ceilings or near ceilings in all these activities as a truck driver pretty quickly. And then where do you go from there? Where do you go from where does that improvement come? Where do you search for it?
Boy, that's a great question. That's a tough question. Again, for me, the improvement and the goals were not specifically job related, but there were ways that I was trying to improve my life outside of the job. And so when I was working in this mind-numbingly boring job and making really good money, and so again, this in some ways was a very, very sweet job on the surface, right? It was really hard for me to think, there's nothing I can do here that is helping me move forward in my life. And then I started to think, well, I mean, it took me an hour to learn the job, right? And that's probably on the outside of it. But what do I want to do next? And so what I would do is before I would go into work, I would, again, I was in college at the time. And so I would look at some of my textbooks and things like that. And when I was doing my job, I was imagining trying to explain things to different types of people, trying to decide how I could use the time that I had, not just to ruminate or to think about things that weren't useful to me, but to try to structure that time in such a way that I could grow from it. It was hard. And like I said, in that kind of an environment, when I was driving the buses, particularly like on the weekend charters and things like that, I had more time. And so I was driving a chunk of the time, but then a lot of my time I'm just sitting, right? And so once I get people to where they are, I park the bus, I'm just sitting, all right? And sometimes on overnight trips, I'd have a hotel room or something. And there was a great temptation not to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided I had to use that time well. And so I started to structure that time, and I started to set goals. So, okay, so when I finish my drive, I drop the people off, park the bus. Rather than just going to the hotel room and watching TV or something, I'm going to exercise. I'm going to find some place to take a walk. Because I was driving all over, I wasn't in the same place all the time. I had to then look up places like little forest preserves or things like that where I could actually go and take a walk. I started to learn the area. I'm very interested in history. And so I would try to find, interesting historical sites, within like a 25, 30-mile range of where I was dropping people off so I could go visit that. But those are the ways that I tried to keep myself sane. And I tried to improve myself. And this is not the same, but I still drive a lot. And so we live here in Illinois. Our families are in Virginia. We're always driving back and forth to Virginia, right, a couple of times a year. And the question is, that's a 15-hour drive. What are we going to do? And so I listen to podcasts. I like to listen to fiction. I try to stay away from things like the news, right? That upsets me.
That's not always easy. That's easier said than done, I would say.
I know that's it. And again, it's this balance of trying to stay in touch with what's going on, with being overwhelmed with details that you can't do anything about.
Yeah.
And so again, I imagine for truck drivers that they're in the truck for a long period of time. Things like talk radio, things like the news, I think it's useful in small quantities. But I think increasingly the research coming out on that is the more people watch the news, the more they listen to talk radio, particularly with a political slant to it, the less relaxed, the more stressed that they are. Listening to fiction, listening to other types of information that's more uplifting tends to be more rejuvenating, and you tend to feel like you're making more progress in your life.
Would you recommend education over the road, as in actual lectures and things like that, listening to lectures while even complex ones, even philosophical and all those types of things?
I think for some people that works. Again, coming from my perspective, the thing that makes me the most engaged and refreshed, I like to listen to novels. I like to listen to a story that can transport me from where I am right now to some kind of other world. And I like to live in that other world for a while. And then it kind of helps me cope better with my world. Like I said, it's different for everyone. Again, a lot of my work is more of that intellectual side. And so having that escape into fiction, that helps me. I particularly like science fiction. But like I said, it's different for everyone. There's some wonderful resources out there. There's an organization called Great Courses, where again, you can buy an entire course and just, every day listen to like an hour. And then at the end of, a couple of weeks, you can finish pretty much a college level course. There's lots of options out there.